The storm came without much warning. One moment the sky was gray and heavy, the way it always looked in late autumn. The next, the wind turned sharp and mean, cutting through the trees like something angry. Snow followed fast, thick, blinding flakes that swallowed the road whole and turned the familiar path into nothing. Ray pulled his coat tighter and kept walking. He was not a young man, but he was not old either. He was somewhere in the middle. The kind of man who had walked enough roads to know when to push on and when to stop. This was a time to stop. He could not see more than a few steps ahead. His boots were already soaking through. The cold had moved past uncomfortable and was becoming something dangerous. He spotted the barn just before dark swallowed it completely. It sat alone at the edge of what had once been a working farm. The farmhouse behind it was long gone. Just a broken stone wall and a collapsed roof poking through the snow. But the barn was still standing. The walls were thick old stone, and most of the roof held. One corner had caved in long ago, but the rest was solid enough. Ray pushed the heavy wooden door open and stepped inside. The wind dropped the moment the door closed behind him. He stood still for a moment and just breathed. The barn smelled of old hay and cold earth. It was not warm, not even close, but it was out of the wind, and that alone felt like mercy. He looked around slowly. There was no animal, no fire, no sign that anyone had been here in a long time. Just stacked bundles of old straw in one corner, a broken cart with one wheel missing, and a scattering of dried leaves across the stone floor. Ray got to work without wasting time. He built a small fire near the wall, using the driest straw he could find and a few broken boards from the cart. He kept it small and careful, just enough to push back the worst of the cold without burning the whole place down. Then he unrolled his pack and spread out his travel blanket, thick wool, worn smooth from years of use, and set out his small tin cup and the last of his dried bread and hard cheese. Not a fine meal. But enough. He sat close to the fire and ate slowly, listening to the storm rage outside. The wind screamed against the stone walls. Snow hissed through the gap in the broken corner of the roof and settled in a small white drift on the floor. The fire crackled quietly. Ray stared into it and let his mind go blank the way a tired man does when the day is finally over. He was reaching for his blanket to settle in for the night when he felt it. Movement. Small. Barely anything. Just the faintest shift of weight inside the rolled blanket, like something turning over in its sleep. Ray froze. He looked at the blanket for a long moment. Then, very slowly, he reached out and lifted the edge. He pulled it back carefully, fold by fold. And there they were. Two of them. Tiny. So small they fit easily in the space between his two open hands. They were curled together in a tight little knot, pressed into the warmest fold of the wool, their bodies shaking with a fine and constant trembling that did not stop even as the blanket opened above them. Their scales were pale, almost white, with just the faintest shimmer of silver at the edges. Their eyes were closed. Their small snouts were tucked under each other's chins. Dragon hatchlings. Ray sat completely still and stared at them for a long time. He had heard of dragons, of course. Everyone had. He had even seen one once, far away, a dark shape moving high across a pale sky, so large it blocked the light for a moment before it was gone. But he had never been this close. He had certainly never seen hatchlings. He had not known they could be this small, this fragile-looking, with their thin little legs folded in tight and their tiny claws curled like closed fists. They were shaking badly. That was the thing that moved him past surprise and into action. He was not afraid of them. He did not stop to think about what a full-grown dragon would do if it found him here. He did not stop to think at all. He just looked at two tiny shaking creatures who were cold and helpless, and he did the only thing that made sense. He wrapped them back up. Gently. Carefully. He folded the blanket around them the way you would wrap something you did not want to break. He tucked the wool close on all sides so no cold air could creep in. Then he held the bundle carefully against his chest, one arm underneath it, and leaned back against the wall near the fire. He sat like that for a long time without moving. One of them shifted after a while. A tiny claw poked out from the edge of the blanket, caught the firelight for a moment, pale silver, almost translucent, and then disappeared back inside. The trembling slowed, bit by bit. Ray added another small piece of board to the fire and pulled his spare coat from his pack, draping it over his legs and across the bundle for extra warmth. He warmed a little broth in his tin cup, just water and a pinch of dried herbs, nothing much. And let it cool to barely warm before tipping a few drops against the edge of the blanket. He did not know if hatchlings drank broth. He did not know much of anything about them. But they were small and cold and exhausted, and warm liquid seemed like a kind thing to offer. There was a faint sound from inside the blanket. Not a cry. Something quieter than that. A small, soft noise that was almost like a sigh. Ray let out a slow breath. Outside, the storm pressed hard against the stone walls. The snow came sideways now, driven by a wind that had no intention of stopping before morning. The fire was small but steady. The barn was cold but still. And Ray sat with his back to the wall and two tiny dragon hatchlings asleep against his chest, and he kept watch through the long dark hours the way a person does when something fragile has been placed in their care. He did not sleep. He just watched the fire and listened to the storm and felt, beneath the wool and the warmth of his own body heat, the slow and steady rise and fall of small breathing. By the time the sky outside began to change, barely lighter, but lighter, the trembling had stopped completely. The two hatchlings lay still and quiet and warm. Ray looked down at them for a moment. Then he added the last piece of wood to the fire, pulled the coat a little higher, and settled in to wait for morning. The fire burned low sometime before midnight. Ray caught it just in time. He had drifted, not into sleep, but into that heavy, half-aware stillness where the mind goes quiet but the body stays upright. He blinked, looked at the fire, and saw it was down to small orange coals barely holding on. He reached for the last of the broken cart boards, snapped one across his knee as quietly as he could, and fed it to the fire piece by piece until the flame came back. The bundle against his chest did not stir. He looked down at it. The blanket rose and fell, very gently, in a slow shared rhythm. Two small sets of lungs breathing together. He could feel the warmth now coming back from them as much as going in, which was a good sign. Cold creatures did not put out warmth. Cold creatures just took it and gave nothing back. The fact that he could feel heat returning through the wool told him something had shifted in the right direction. He allowed himself one small moment of relief. Then the wind found a gap in the roof corner again and came pouring through, and he pulled his spare coat tighter across the bundle and turned his shoulder to block what he could. The hours moved slowly the way they always do in the deep middle of the night. Ray passed the time the way a watchful person does, small tasks, quiet thoughts, careful attention to anything that changed. He fed the fire in small amounts. He listened to the storm. He checked the blanket with the back of his hand every so often, feeling for warmth, feeling for that continued rise and fall. Twice he warmed the tin cup again, just a little water with the last pinch of his dried herbs, and held it close to the edge of the blanket. The second time, something happened. A tiny nose appeared at the gap in the wool. Just the tip of it, pale, almost white, with two small nostrils that flared once, twice, testing the air. Ray went completely still. He did not move his hand. He did not pull the cup away. He just held it steady and waited. The nose moved closer. A small tongue came out, barely the length of Ray's thumbnail, and touched the rim of the cup. Once. Then again. Then the nose disappeared back into the blanket and there was a faint soft sound from inside, very quiet, somewhere between a chirp and a hum. Ray smiled for the first time all night. He kept his voice low when he spoke. He was not even sure why he spoke, there was no one to hear him, and the hatchlings almost certainly did not understand words. But the barn was very quiet and very dark, and speaking softly seemed like the right thing to do. "There you go," he said. "That's something, at least." He warmed the cup one more time and held it near the blanket's edge and waited. The nose came back. This time it stayed longer. The small tongue worked at the rim in a slow, careful way, taking just a little at a time, and Ray held the cup steady without moving until the hatchling seemed satisfied. Then the nose withdrew again, and the blanket settled, and the breathing inside went slow and deep. Ray leaned his head back against the stone wall. He thought about the dragon he had seen once, years ago, crossing the sky far overhead. He had been a boy then, standing in a field with his father. He remembered the shadow more than anything, the way it moved across the ground, wide and fast and silent. He remembered his father putting a hand on his shoulder and saying nothing. Just standing there, watching. As if words would have been too small for the moment. He looked down at the bundle in his arms. It was difficult to connect that vast shadow in the sky to these two tiny things wrapped in worn wool. And yet here they were. The same kind of creature, just at the very beginning of it. Fragile and small and dependent on warmth they could not yet make for themselves. He understood that more than he expected to. Sometime in the hours before dawn, one of them woke fully. Ray felt it before he saw it, a change in the quality of the movement under the blanket. Less the slow shift of sleep and more something deliberate. Something aware. The wool moved. A small head pushed up from inside and emerged slowly into the firelight. Ray did not move. The hatchling was the smaller of the two. Its scales were very pale, almost the color of fresh snow, with silver catching the light along the edges. Its eyes, now open, were a deep and steady amber, large for its face, clear and sharp and fully awake. It looked at the fire first. Then at the barn around it. Then, slowly, it turned and looked directly at Ray. They regarded each other in silence. Ray kept his breathing even and slow. He kept his hands still. He kept his face as calm as he could manage, which was not difficult because he genuinely felt calm. He was not frightened of this small creature. He was just watching it, the same way it was watching him. The hatchling's nostrils moved. It was taking in his scent, reading him the way animals do, through the nose first and eyes second. Its small head tilted to one side. Then the other. A tiny sound came from it, very soft, just a breath of a sound, and from inside the blanket the second hatchling stirred in response. A moment later, the second head appeared. This one was slightly larger, its scales carrying just a little more color. Still pale, but with a faint warmth to them, like ivory held near a candle. Its eyes were the same deep amber. It looked at Ray with the same long, measuring stillness. Ray spoke quietly. "Morning," he said. "Or close enough." Neither hatchling moved away. That was the thing he noticed most. They looked at him, really looked, the way aware creatures do, and they did not pull back. The smaller one, after a long moment, lowered its chin to the edge of the blanket and simply rested there, watching him with those calm amber eyes. The larger one shifted slightly and pressed its side against its sibling, but kept its gaze on Ray. Still cautious. Still uncertain. But not afraid enough to run. Ray reached out slowly and added the very last piece of wood to the fire. The flame rose a little, pushed the cold back another few inches, and sent warm light moving across the stone walls. The two small faces tracked the movement of the light with interest, heads turning together like they shared one thought. Outside, the storm had finally begun to tire. The wind still pushed against the walls, but quieter now. The hard edge was gone from it. Snow still fell, but gently, the way it does at the end rather than the middle. Ray looked at the two hatchlings resting in the fold of his blanket, warm and breathing and watching him with wide amber eyes. He did not know what the day would bring. He did not know whose they were, or how they had come to be alone in an abandoned barn in the middle of a freezing storm. He did not know what would happen when the world outside woke up and started looking for them. But right now, in the quiet gray light of early morning, they were safe and he was here. That was enough for now. The morning came gray and cold. The storm had pulled back during the early hours, leaving behind a silence that felt almost too complete. No wind. No howling through the roof gap. Just the soft sound of snow settling outside and the last quiet breathing of the fire as it burned down to ash and faint warmth. Ray had not slept. He was past the point of feeling tired in any sharp way. Tiredness had moved through him in the night and come out the other side into something dull and steady. A heaviness in his limbs, a slowness behind his eyes. But he was awake. He was present. And the two hatchlings were still nestled against his chest, warm and quiet, their small sides rising and falling in the easy rhythm of deep sleep. He let them sleep. He sat with his back against the cold stone wall and watched the pale light grow through the gap in the roof corner. He had no more wood for the fire. He had no more broth to warm. He had very little of anything left, in truth. But the storm was over, and the hatchlings were alive, and that felt like more than enough to have come out of a night like that one. He was thinking about standing, about stretching his stiff legs and seeing what the road looked like under the snow, when he heard it. A sound from above. Not wind. Not the creak of old wood settling in the cold. Something else. Something heavy moving fast, high up, cutting through the still morning air with a rhythm that Ray felt in his chest before his ears fully understood it. Wings. Large ones. He went still without deciding to. His body made that choice on its own, the deep animal part of him that knew, without needing to be told, that something very big was coming and that moving quickly would be the wrong thing to do. The sound grew. Fast. Faster than he expected. Then the roof came apart. Not all of it, just the section directly above him, the old beams and stone tiles that had held on through decades of storms suddenly meaning nothing at all. They exploded upward and outward as something enormous came through from above, and Ray threw his free arm up over his head on instinct, tucking the hatchlings tighter against his chest with the other, curling his body around them as debris rained down across the barn floor. Dust. Chunks of old stone. Splinters of beam wood. Then silence. Ray lowered his arms slowly and looked up. Sarah filled the gap where the roof had been. She was massive in a way that the word massive does not quite cover. Her body blocked out the pale morning sky completely. Her wingspan, even half-folded as it was now, stretched wider than the barn itself. Her scales were deep charcoal gray, almost black, with a faint blue sheen along her neck and shoulders that caught the thin winter light. Her claws, each one longer than Ray's forearm, gripped the broken edge of the roof with a pressure that crumbled the old stone slowly to powder. And her eyes were fixed on Ray. They were gold. Bright, sharp, burning gold, with a vertical black pupil that contracted the moment it landed on him. Not the soft amber of the hatchlings. This was a different kind of gold entirely, the kind that had nothing gentle in it. The kind that had seen a great many things and judged most of them quickly and finally. She was judging Ray now. He did not move. He understood with absolute clarity that any fast movement would be his last. He understood that this dragon, this mother, had torn a stone roof apart with her bare claws in the time it took him to blink, and that she could do the same to him without effort or hesitation. He understood all of that completely. And still he did not move, because moving meant uncovering the hatchlings, and he was not going to do that. So he sat. Back straight against the wall. Both hatchlings held against his chest under his coat and blanket. Hands visible, open, resting on his knees. He looked up at Sarah and he kept his breathing slow and he waited. Sarah lowered her great head. It came down slowly through the broken roof, that enormous head, until it was level with Ray's position on the floor. Close. Terribly close. He could feel the heat coming off her breath, warm and dry and smelling of stone and something like smoke that had been burning for a very long time. Her nostrils flared. She was doing what the hatchlings had done in the night. Reading the air, reading him, pulling in everything she could through scent before she decided anything. Ray breathed out slowly. He said nothing. He did not think words would help here. He just sat still and let her look. Then the hatchlings woke up. It happened the way waking always does with small creatures, suddenly and completely, no slow transition between sleep and awareness. One moment they were still. The next, both small heads were up, both sets of amber eyes were open, and both hatchlings were looking straight up at their mother. The sound they made was immediate and bright. Chirping. Quick and high and layered over each other, both of them at once, a rapid tumbling sound that filled the broken barn and bounced off the stone walls. It was the sound of recognition. The sound of relief. Pure and simple and unmistakable, even to a human who had never heard it before in his life. And then, instead of climbing toward her, instead of pushing away from Ray toward the enormous familiar presence above them, they pressed closer to him. Both of them. The smaller one tucked its head under Ray's chin. The larger one pushed its snout against his ribs and made a soft, low sound that was different from the chirping, something quieter, something that had contentment in it. They did not let go of him. They called to their mother and they held on to the human who had kept them warm, both things at once, as if they saw no contradiction in it at all. Sarah went completely still. The gold eyes moved from the hatchlings to Ray. Then back to the hatchlings. Then to Ray again. The burning sharpness in them did not disappear, but something changed behind it. Some very fast and very thorough recalculation was happening in that vast and ancient mind. Ray could almost feel it, the shift, the reassessment, the slow arrival at a conclusion that did not match the one she had come here with. She had come to retrieve her young from danger. She was looking at her young pressed willingly and warmly against the source of that supposed danger. The claws on the broken roof edge loosened slightly. The great head did not pull back, but it tilted, just a fraction, just enough to change the angle of those gold eyes from threat to something closer to examination. The heat of her breath came in slower pulses now. Still enormous. Still powerful enough to make Ray's eyes water. But no longer the sharp fast breath of something about to strike. Ray held the hatchlings gently and looked up at Sarah and did not look away. Outside, the winter sky was pale and wide and silent. The snow had stopped completely. Sarah did not move for a long time. She stayed where she was, her massive body blocking the open sky above the broken roof, her gold eyes fixed on Ray with that slow and careful attention that felt less like anger now and more like something trying to understand. The hatchlings had settled again against Ray's chest. The chirping had stopped. They were quiet and warm and completely unbothered by the enormous presence above them, the way young creatures often are when they feel safe, trusting that safety will simply continue without needing to think about it. Ray stayed still. He had not moved from his position against the wall since Sarah had come through the roof. His legs were stiff and his back ached from the long night on the cold stone floor, but he did not shift or stretch or do anything that might break whatever fragile understanding was currently sitting between himself and a dragon the size of a small house. He just waited. Sarah's nostrils moved again. Slow and deep this time, not the sharp quick testing of before. She was not searching for threat anymore. She was reading something else, the long history of the night written in warmth and broth and wood smoke, the story of what had happened here told entirely through scent. Ray watched her eyes change as she read it. Watched something move through them that was not quite readable but was clearly not rage. Then she did something he did not expect. She lowered her head. Not the way she had lowered it before, to bring her eyes level with his and examine him at close range. This was different. This was slower. More deliberate. She brought her great head down and forward until her chin nearly touched the stone floor of the barn, and she held it there. Her neck curved. Her eyes, now level with the ground, were still open, still watching him, but the angle of them had changed entirely. It was a bow. Ray recognized it as that even though he had never seen a dragon bow before in his life. There was no mistaking the shape of it, the lowering, the stillness, the held position. It was the same gesture a person makes when words are not enough and the body has to speak instead. He did not know what it meant exactly. But he understood that it was not nothing. He gave a small nod in return, the only answer he had, and Sarah held her position a moment longer before slowly raising her head back to its full height. She looked at the hatchlings one more time, a long, steady look that seemed to satisfy something in her, and then she drew back slightly, her claws releasing the broken roof edge, her wings adjusting with a sound like heavy cloth in wind. She did not leave. She simply waited, above and beyond the broken barn, a vast dark shape against the pale sky. Ray finally let himself breathe properly. He shifted his back against the wall and stretched one leg carefully and looked down at the two small faces tucked against him. The larger hatchling had its eyes half open, drowsy and content. The smaller one was fully asleep again, its pale snout resting on Ray's forearm with complete and unguarded trust. He shook his head slowly. He still did not fully understand what had just happened. He understood the broad shape of it, mother, children, the night, the warmth. But the bow had thrown him. That gesture had not been simple relief. It had been something with weight to it, something formal, and he had no framework to put it in. He heard the second dragon before he saw it. This arrival was different from Sarah's. No speed. No violence. Just a slow and steady descent from somewhere above, the sound of enormous wings moving in long unhurried beats, the kind of flight that belongs to something that has been flying for so long it no longer needs to think about it. A shadow passed over the broken roof. Then a shape settled on the far wall of the barn, landing with a heaviness that sent a fine dust down from the remaining rafters. Ray looked across the barn at the new arrival. This dragon was old. That was the first and clearest thing about it. The scales had the look of very old stone, deep gray, almost brown at the edges, worn smooth in places the way rock is worn by long years of weather. Its face carried the particular stillness of great age, the kind that had moved past urgency into something permanent and unhurried. One of its eyes had a long pale scar running through it that had clearly been there for decades. The other eye was a deep and steady copper color that caught the morning light and held it. It looked at Ray for a moment. Then it spoke. "You kept them through the night." The voice was low and slow and carried the faint roughness of something not often used in the human tongue. But the words were clear. Completely clear. Ray stared at the old dragon for a moment before he found his own voice. "They were cold," he said. "I had a blanket." The old dragon was quiet for a moment. "My name is Drath," it said. "I am elder to this clan. Sarah called for me before she came here. I arrived to find what I find." Ray looked at the old dragon steadily. "What do you find?" Drath's copper eye moved from Ray to the hatchlings and back again. "Two hatchlings alive who should not have survived that storm alone," he said. "And a human who stayed with them through a death-cold night when he had no reason to." Ray said nothing. He did not think that needed a response. "You saw Sarah bow," Drath said. "I did. Do you know what that means?" It was not quite a question. Ray shook his head slowly. "I know it meant something. I don't know what." Drath shifted his weight on the wall with a slow and careful movement. "Among our kind," he said, "that gesture is given to clan elders. To those who have earned it through long years of service and sacrifice. Sarah has given it to no living creature in her life. Not once." He paused. "Until this morning." Ray looked across the barn at the old dragon and said nothing. "She cannot explain it in your words," Drath continued. She does not have them. But I will tell you what it means so that you understand the fullness of what passed between you. He looked at the hatchlings again, one sleeping, one half awake, both unhurt, both warm. It means that in her eyes and in the eyes of this clan, you are no longer a stranger. You are something else entirely. Ray looked down at the small sleeping face on his forearm. I just kept them warm, he said quietly. Yes, said Drath. And something in the old copper eye shifted. Not quite a smile, but the dragon equivalent of one. That is exactly what you did. Outside, Sarah's shadow moved slowly across the snow. The morning held still and cold and waiting around all of them. Drath was quiet for a long moment after his last words. The barn sat still around them. Cold morning air moved through the broken roof in slow drifts, carrying the clean sharp smell of fresh snow and open sky. The fire had been dead for hours now, just a gray patch of ash on the stone floor. But the barn did not feel as cold as it had in the night. Something had changed in it. Some quality of the air, or perhaps just the way Ray felt sitting in it, was different from the long dark hours before dawn. He was still holding the hatchlings. The smaller one was still asleep, tucked against his ribs with its chin on his forearm. The larger one had come fully awake now and was watching Drath with calm amber eyes, occasionally glancing up at Ray the way young creatures check in with whoever is keeping them safe. Ray had stopped noticing he was doing it. The small adjustments of his arm, the slight tightening when the hatchling shifted, the automatic attention to warmth and stillness. It had become natural somewhere in the long night without him deciding it would. Drath watched all of this without speaking. Then he said, there is a title. Ray looked up at the old dragon. Among our kind, Drath continued, in that slow and careful way he had of forming the human words, when a person outside the clan shelters hatchlings through mortal cold. When they give their own warmth without being asked and ask nothing in return, there is a name for that person. He paused. Hearthguard. Ray repeated the word quietly. Hearthguard. It is old, Drath said. Older than the clan's current memory. There are records of it in the stone histories, passed down through elders. But no living member of this clan has seen it given. The copper eye held steady on Ray. No outsider has held that name in longer than I have been alive. And I have been alive for a very long time. Ray looked down at the hatchlings for a moment. I'm not looking for a title, he said. Not defensively. Just honestly, the way he said most things. I know, said Drath. That is partly why it is being given. Ray was quiet. He understood the logic of that, even if he hadn't expected it. What does it mean, he said. Practically. Drath considered the question with the same unhurried weight he gave everything. It means the clan knows your name, he said. It means any clan fire is open to you. Any clan shelter in cold or storm. You will not be turned away. You will not be questioned. He paused. It means you are seen. Such a simple word for such a large thing. Ray looked across the barn at the old dragon and felt something move through him that he did not immediately have a name for. Not pride exactly. Not relief. Something quieter than both of those. Something that sat low and warm and did not make any noise. He had been traveling alone for a long time. Not because he had to. He had made that choice, the way people sometimes do after enough things have changed around them. He had told himself he preferred it. The open road, his own pace, no one else's needs to account for. He had believed that, more or less. It had been easy enough to believe when the alternative was not in front of him. But sitting here, in a broken barn in the cold, with two small dragons asleep against his chest and an ancient elder speaking his name into the morning air. He felt the edges of that belief soften. There is one more thing, Drath said. Ray looked up. The hatchlings. Drath's voice was slower now, more careful, as if he was choosing each word with particular attention. Among our kind, a hatchling remembers. Not the way older dragons remember, not in stories or records. In the bone. In the blood. The earliest warmth a hatchling knows becomes part of what they are. It does not leave them. He looked at the two small creatures against Ray's chest. These two will carry the memory of this night for the length of their lives. And dragons live a very long time. Ray looked down at them. The smaller one had woken while Drath was speaking. Both sets of amber eyes were open now, both small faces turned up toward Ray with that same quiet watchful expression they had worn since morning. Taking him in. Memorizing him, perhaps, in whatever way hatchlings did that. They will carry your name, Drath said. When they are grown. When they are older than you will live to see. They will still know it. Ray. The one who stayed. Ray's throat was tight. He did not say anything for a moment. He looked at the two pale faces watching him and he thought about that, about a name traveling forward through decades, through centuries maybe, carried inside two creatures who would grow larger than this barn, larger than this field, larger than anything he could currently picture. His name. Just his name. Spoken in whatever way dragons spoke names among themselves, in whatever form it took when it moved from the human tongue into something older and wider. It was more than gold. It was more than land. It was the most permanent thing anyone had ever offered him, and it had come from a cold night and a wool blanket and the simple decision not to walk past something that needed help. He stayed at the clan fire that day. Sarah had come down from the sky when Drath called her, landing in the wide snowy field behind the barn with a slowness that was different from her arrival. She had taken the hatchlings gently, one at a time, her enormous head dipping low, her movements careful in a way that clearly took effort from a creature her size. The smaller hatchling had gone willingly. The larger one had looked back at Ray once before tucking against its mother's chest. Ray had raised one hand. The hatchling had held his gaze for a moment longer. Then it was gone. The clan fire was not what Ray had pictured. It was in a wide stone hollow in the hillside beyond the field, sheltered on three sides, large enough for dragons to gather around with room to spare. Two other clan members were there when Drath led Ray to it, younger than Drath, both watching Ray with the careful attention of creatures encountering something unfamiliar. But neither moved against him. Drath had spoken before they arrived. The name had already traveled ahead. Ray sat at that fire for the better part of the morning. He dried his boots. He ate the food the clan placed near him, he did not ask what it was, and it was warm and it was enough. He sat and let the heat reach all the way through him for the first time in a day and a night. He did not talk much. Neither did anyone else. It was simply warmth and stillness and the quiet acknowledgement of shared space. When he finally stood to leave, Drath walked with him to the road. They did not say much at the parting. There was not a great deal left to say. Drath stood at the field's edge and Ray stood on the road with his pack on his back and his blanket rolled and his tin cup hanging from his belt, same as always. "Safe road," said Drath. "Thank you," said Ray. He walked. The road was white and quiet under a pale sky. His boots left clean prints in the snow behind him. The cold was still there, steady and honest, but it did not feel the same as it had the morning before. He walked with his hands in his pockets and his breath clouding in the air ahead of him and something sitting quietly in his chest that had not been there before. He was still alone on the road. But the world behind him held two small creatures who knew his name. And somehow, that made all the difference.